First, to showcase the talent of our competitors, and second, to recognize members of our campus community who provide support to our team. And if you're here for extra credit, you have to wait till the end. Sorry, bummer, I know. The title of our showcase, the Dean's Debate, intends to honor the long-standing support the SDU has received from the Bauernfein College of Business. Tonight, we express our dearest, sincerest gratitude to Dr. Keller, Interim Dean of Bauernfein College of Business, and his outstanding team who worked tirelessly to ensure the SDU has the opportunity to travel and compete on behalf of Murray State. We ask that you please stand and be recognized. We quite literally could not do what we do without your support. Thank you. Your continued support ensures that these students can continue showcasing their exceptional talents. At this time, 5 of the 6 members of the SDU traveling to tournaments have been recruited from the Commonwealth Honors Academy. The Commonwealth Honors Academy is a 3-week academic enrichment experience for rising high school seniors held every June at Murray State University. Students live on campus while taking college-level honors classes and participating in fun activities and seminars to help them grow personally and socially. Such an event does not happen without 3 individuals. First, Ms. Lori Rogers, the Administrative Assistant for the Honors College. Second, Dr. Laura Sullivan-Beckers, the Academic Dean. And third, Professor Melanie McCallan-Seib, Student Life Dean. Would these individuals please stand and be recognized? Thank you for all that you do to enrich the lives of our students and the community of Murray State. We really would not have a team without your support. If you've seen our new promotional materials, this is all thanks to Professor Ed Rohde and his Vice Comm students in his commercial photography class. Lastly, we would like to thank Jeremy McKeel and the folks over in the Digital Media Services for helping us broadcast this event. Now, it's time to introduce our esteemed VIP judges. Our first VIP is Professor Lee Wright. Professor Lee serves as an advisor to the Murray State News, the award-winning student-run organization on campus. Under her leadership, the Murray State News has experienced explosive growth and charted new waters, reaching new audiences and engaging more students through digital publications and soliciting advertisements with businesses in our community but are few of her innovative additions. Just last month, the Murray State News won 7 Pinnacle Awards, including 2 first places from the College Media Association during Media Fest in Washington, D.C. That doubles the awards they won last year, signifying exponential growth and the ability to keep up with other schools that are several times the size of Murray State. Wright has taught journalism at Murray State since 2011 and previously worked in a variety of roles at the Paducah Sun. Wright has recently been recognized as an emerging advisor of the year by the College Media Association. Wright holds 2 degrees from Murray State when she's not busy advising students, journalists, or grading news stories. Wright enjoys knitting, sewing, and spending time with her family. Our second VIP is Mr. Mike Weatherford. Mike Weatherford is an entrepreneur and businessman from Paris, Tennessee. He started his first business almost 40 years ago in the late 1980s, which he continues to operate today. Mike is a well-known promoter for motorsports, concerts, and bringing live entertainment to your festival. A champion drag racer across the southeastern United States for many years, he started a boxing gym that helps the youth with a path to the Olympics, along with training professional boxers. He was featured in several movies, music videos, a stunt driver, and in a documentary about his life. In June 2021, he began The Mike Weatherford Show, a podcast on Facebook with a well-known producer from Home Shopping Network, Kevin Gill. The show quickly became a local favorite before reaching all 50 states and other countries with subjects from Bigfoot and aliens to politics. The show now averages over 1 million viewers a month and can be found on all streaming platforms. Mike has affectionately now been dubbed the Podfather. Recently, the Murray State Speech and Debate team were featured on the Mike Rutherford Show in a live, one-of-a-kind extemporaneous debate. Out of his business interests and podcasts, Mike enjoys hunting, all outdoor activities, along with keeping in contact with all the friends he has made with his life story. And our third VIP judge is Dr. Gary Zaruth. Dr. Gary Zaruth is Associate Professor of Cellular and Molecular Biology at the Houston Endowed Professor of Biomedical Science at Murray State University. Dr. Zaruth came to Murray State in 2014 after earning his PhD in Cellular and Molecular Biology from the University of South Florida and completing a postdoctorate fellowship within the Laboratory of Immunity, Inflammation, and Disease in the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, one of the National Institutes of Health. The Zaruth Research Lab is broadly interested in understanding how genes coordinate cell fate specifications, decisions during development with the hope of identifying novel therapies for treatment or prevention of chronic disease. Dr. Zaruth has published more than a dozen peer-reviewed research articles and several on editorial boards as an ad hoc reviewer for numerous biomedical journals. Dr. Zaruth has been recognized with several research and teaching awards, including the NIH Fellows Award for Research Excellence, the Emerging Scholar Award, the Distinguished Service Award, and twice honored as the Outstanding Professor of Biology. Professionally, Dr. Zaruth is a member of the Endocrine Society, the Kentucky Academy of Science, the Institutional Network for Biomedical Excellence, and the Sigma Xi Scientific Research Honor Society. In addition to scholarships and teaching, Dr. Zaruth has elected faculty regent in 2024 and is an active member of the university community, serving on numerous departmental, collegiate, and university communities. Eager to share his passion for science, Dr. Zaruth has regularly engages in outreach events to foster scientific awareness and enthusiasm among the community, and enjoys visiting local and regional schools to promote scientific research and careers in science. Thank you all for your time, your expertise, and your support for the Speech and Debate Union, and your commitment to the community. Without you, we would not have a winner. Our first performance tonight is a communication analysis performed by Caleb McCurran. A communication analysis takes an artifact and analyzes it through the lens of a theory. Caleb's speech examines the movie Arrival to the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis to help us understand how linguistics are culturally constructed and influence our ability to communicate with others. Please welcome Mr. Caleb McCurran to the stage.
How's everybody doing? Yeah! Thank you guys for coming out today. Thank all of you guys for coming out today. It's almost done. Time and the future is scary. It's 2025, and now on websites, I have to scroll to find the year I was born. Just to put time in a unique perspective, I made a tentative, relevant timeline. Here you can see that COVID happened 5 This timeline also supports the idea that those last two things were mostly in the news cycle to distract you from the fact, yes you, Dr. Keller, from the fact that the government elite are still hiding the Epstein files from us. But hey, we had some fun with it. Maybe I'm just getting old, but this shit feels like yesterday. Why? Why is it that some people who experience these events and read this news feel as though it happened just last week? The short answer, time is subjective, in part because of how we think. Now, before I go any further, rest assured, this speech isn't about the theory of relativity or some physics shit. It's about my favorite movie, Arrival. Today, I will probe for my artifact and favorite movie, explore the effects of the Sapir-Whorf theory of language, and dissect the implications of the theory in the movie. Hopefully by the end, I'll also convince you guys to try out the masterpiece that is Arrival. So first off, what's all the hype about Arrival anyway? 94% on Rotten Tomatoes, excuse me. I'll beam the plot into two main signals, each carrying ideas meant to spark our minds, language and time. First, let's navigate the importance of language. The film follows linguist Dr. Banks as she is recruited by the US Army to discover how to communicate with extraterrestrials that have landed in Montana, of all places. A total of 12 alien pods land in different countries across the world. We need to know why. Dr. Banks must first establish a common language with the aliens before she can understand a response. Before she can ask the question, what is your purpose on Earth? We have to establish a whole bunch of things, like, what is a question? Are we talking you collectively, as in the alien race, or you as in Mr. Joe Alien? What purpose does a purpose serve? And seriously, guys, what the hell is a preposition? The English language is so complex, but so is any other language you're not familiar with. Dr. Banks not only communicates with the aliens, but she also speaks with the heads of foreign countries, navigating their responses and deciphering their strategies. Secondly, let's launch into the importance of the idea of time. But the audience is made to believe our flashbacks are actually flash forwards, as the alien language is non-linear. As Dr. Banks inadvertently immerses herself in the alien language, she begins to hallucinate visions of her and a child she seems to not recognize. Her child from the future. She isn't being reminded of her past like the audience was made to believe. She is seeing her future, and she's just as confused as we are. Now, it shouldn't be surprising that in a sci-fi movie, time becomes warped, but it really catches us off guard, because we have a stagnant, constant view of time. Now, I know this may be confusing, so here is an example. Imagine you wanted to write a sentence using both hands, starting from both sides. You would have to know exactly each word you wanted to use, as well as how much space each would occupy. The aliens are capable of doing this effortlessly in 2 seconds, because their language is non-linear, meaning it's not read in a straight line. A lot like the karaoke screen when you're hammered. Unlike all human written language, the alien's writing is symbolic. It conveys meaning, it does not represent sound. And so the circle is not just a sentence, but it's a thought, an emotion, even a memory. Banks's visions are spurred by her learning the alien language, something we don't expect due to our fixed, linear view of time. But I mean, how the hell does she see the future just from talking to some aliens? The answer, Sapir-Whorf theory. This is where we put the communication and communication analysis. There are two main aspects of the theory. Language shapes how we see the world, and language is relative. To better understand the subjective nature of language, we have to first understand the theory. The theory posits that the language a person speaks influences their cognitions and the perceptions of the world. First, language is subjective. Words convey meaning based on our environment and based on how they're formed. For example, the terms businessman and fireman. Fireman calendar? Bing! Enable us to think men in our culture whenever we think of these professions. This extends to other terms like manpower, where a more neutral term would be person power. It would be more neutral and correct. Better yet, something like horsepower. Horse calendar? Bing! Inclusivity. Now that's the name of a racehorse I depend on. But you see that the thoughts are right there in our language, in our culture, which explains why most cultures across the world are at least a teensy bit sexist. Sapir-Whorf theory also explains how different cultures share different gender categories of work. Similarly, there are differences between cultures that assign words as grammatically masculine or feminine. For example, the term bridge is feminine in German, but masculine in Spanish. In a Stanford linguistic study involving the two languages, German speakers often describe bridges using more stereotypically feminine words like beautiful and elegant, whereas Spanish speakers often describe them as strong, long, and big. This is because the same word holds different cultural relevance within the two languages. Second, language forms our cognitions from a very early age. Language is a part of culture and thus is a driving force of how we interact with our world. A psychological study from MIT shows that native Russian speakers have the ability to distinguish between more shades of color faster and more reliably than do English speakers. This is because the Russian language describes color almost identically to how we do, except they have more colors. The Russian language divides the color blue as we know it into two completely distinct color categories like we would with pink and purple. Theorists hypothesize that Russian natives have this ability to distinguish between more shades of color faster and more reliably because they do so since early childhood. So that's cool and all, but I was just talking about a movie, so where does that all land in relation to the movie? In short, everywhere. Language doesn't just help us say things. It tells the human brain what to think and how to think it. It's not just a poetic interpretation of syntax, but it is the very tool that we use in all aspects of life. Because of this, language changes how we see the world, past, present, and future. And this is exactly what happened to Dr. Banks. There are two primary notable implications of the theory and the movie: language-induced thoughts and the power of diction. Our first implication comes into play in a scene in which Dr. Banks realizes China has been conversating with their alien pod via the game Mahjong. Dr. Banks explains that this is really bad, because in a game, every word is a calculated step. If all you are given is a hammer, everything is a nail. Sapir-Whorf theory backs this idiom, showing how the alien language, the hammer, fundamentally retools our perceptions of language and time, the nails. Because in a game, you either win or lose. This shows that Sapir-Whorf theory shows that in a conversation about winning or losing, the conversation becomes a lot less about communication and a lot more like a battle. The second notable implication is the mom special. It's not always just what you say, it's also how you say it. Shocking. This comes into play in a key scene in which Dr. Banks realizes that the Sapir-Whorf theory has been reshaping her reality. As Dr. Banks inadvertently immerses herself in the alien language, she begins to hallucinate the visions of her and a child. Sapir-Whorf theory states that this happens because the language is fundamentally reshaping her mind, because this language is unlike all human languages. These radically different patterns cause her to hallucinate. But we know now that she was just literally forming new lived experiences through her newly acquired language and way of perceiving the world. If you could see your whole life, start to finish, would you change anything? Everything is connected. And at the root of it all, we have to understand each other and overcome one another's differences in order to innovate and thrive. In a world full of objectivity bound by time, Arrival challenges our belief that language, like time, is linear. That explains why so many people experience events as though they were more recent than they actually were. I could have swore I was just really mad at Cracker Barrel just last week. But seriously, jokes aside, if you could see your whole life, start to finish, would you change anything?
So this thing takes a little bit to rise up. We're gonna give it a second. It's taking its sweet time. go, guys. It's now time to introduce tonight's competitors for our debate. Representing the affirmative tonight is the lean, mean, Bruce Bucky's loving machine, Mr. Colton Boyd. Colton Boyd is a freshman physics and mathematics double major. He is from Simpsonville, Kentucky, and represents R.H. White College. His goal is to pursue a career in astrophysics. Representing the negative tonight, she's sarcastic, she's witty, but when it comes to debates, she's nitty-gritty. Give it up for Miss Isabella Voss. Isabella Voss is a freshman criminal justice major who is from Dexter, Missouri. After graduating, she plans to complete her Juris Doctorate and practice criminal law. Both Isabella and Colton attend the prestigious Commonwealth Honors Academy in June of 2024, which is an intense 3-week adventure where students take two honors level courses. They were both in Dr. Goat's debate course, and because of their outstanding performance, he recruited them to join the SDU when they attended Murray State as freshmen this past August. Something you should understand about debate competitions that we participate in is that the competitors are assigned topics at random, and they do not get to choose the side they represent. The topics of debate revolve heavily around pop culture, current events, and real issues that are or are not being discussed in our legislature. In keeping with the spirit of our tournaments, the topic for tonight's debate is one that has been discussed and debated in recent political developments. The topic is, childhood literacy should be the primary concern of K-12 education. As the AF, Colton must advocate for prioritization of childhood literacy. As the neg, Isabella must negate the resolution and argue why this should not be the primary focus of K-12 education. Before we begin, something you should know about parliamentary procedure in our debates is that there is no clapping. We do not clap, we knock. You knock at the end of each speech to acknowledge their performance, and during their speech, you can knock if you show your support. If you understand, give a little knock. We will now start with the AF's first speech.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started by thanking everybody for being here. Give yourself a pat on the back. We at the SDU are very excited to have you here, audience members and VIP judges today. So I thank you for that from the bottom of my heart. Today, as was stated, the resolution is childhood literacy should be the #1 concern for schools K through 12. And I am the affirmative, so I am in affirmation of this resolution. Just to go over a disclaimer, we're going to go ahead and look at what this means for our context of the debate. We're going to go through the harms presented by the current status quo, my plan on how I am going to implement change to what we see today, along with how this solves the issues and some advantages it brings to the status quo. First, we see that today, national literacy is dangerously low. Right now, the National Specimen on Educational Progress states that only 33% of 4th graders and 31% of 8th graders are reading at a proficient level. So this means that the majority of kids in school aren't where they need to be grade level wise. Along with this, the Ann Cassidy Foundation in 2023 found that students that are not reading proficiently by 3rd grade have a 4 times greater chance to drop out by high school. So we know that if kids aren't reading and have a proficient literacy rate at a young age, then they're doomed for failure from the start. The impact here is that students are leaving school with a lack of literacy, and it's harming competitiveness and equality outside of K-12 public school. Along with this, another harm is that there's currently a lack of concern in American public schools. The U.S. public school system prioritizes STEM, standardized testing, instead of literacy concerns. The National Council on Teacher Quality found that less than half of all teacher education programs prepare teachers for evidence-based reading instruction. So most teachers in the U.S. don't even know how to teach their kids to be where they should be in terms of childhood literacy, which is a huge issue. Here we see the impact is that this system does not care like it should, which is why we must prioritize and make them the number one concern for schools K through 12. Now we're going to talk about my plan and how I'm going to address the issues we see today in the United States. Currently, all public schools will be provided with federal literacy grants for early reading intervention and specialist K through 3. So we're addressing that early issue that we've talked about. Along with this, states now must include literacy progress metrics in public schools and report them to the Department of Education and provide training for teachers from the Department of Education. So now we have two ways in which we can help solve these issues. We have the ability to do this by reallocating 10% of Title I funding or funding that's used for schools that are at risk, where we already see that the funding goes towards this early intervention. We're simply going to make a budget that is specifically outlined for this, and we're going to expand the grants in order to support schools that don't currently have the money. And the timeline and implementation for this will be within one school calendar year. So now that I've discussed how we're going to make them the number one concern for schools K through 12, we're going to look at how exactly my plan addresses our harms and provides advantages that you wouldn't necessarily think about. First, it's going to fix the low bar within the United States. Right now, the National Bureau of Economics states that early literacy intervention increases graduation rates by 12%. So that huge issue that we're seeing, and by intervening at a young age, we're able to directly address this and raise the level at which kids are going to be graduating. And the second is going to be there's now a state legal framework. Currently, states are not required to report literacy rates for students to the Department of Education. So by raising that level we talked about already, and having those metrics now, we can be greater informed on how to make this a priority and showcase why it's important that this is the number one priority in K through 12 public schools. Along with that, there are a few advantages it provides from the status quo. We see that it's going to provide success in all subjects. Students proficient in reading by 3rd grade perform better across all subjects and are more likely to graduate, and that's from the Brookings Institute. Along with this, we see economic growth. And illiteracy costs the U.S. economy $300 billion annually in lost productivity. And students with higher literacy rates end up earning 42% more income. And lastly, we have civic engagement. Pew Research Institute finds that individuals with higher literacy ratings are 50% more likely to vote, get involved in communities, and help others out. We see how overall, with this being a policy and we have these net benefits to students that we must weigh this round on, you must vote for the affirmation in saying that childhood literacy should be the number one concern for public schools K through 12. We will now have cross-examination from my opponent.
All right, so I've just got a couple quick questions for you today. So you said that right now a big lack of concern in school system exists, and of course I agree. However, you said that schools are too focused on STEM and standardized testing, and that these are and you also mentioned evidence-based learning in your new plan. So I'm wondering, what kind of evidence are we looking at that shows that these children are increasing their literacy rates?
Right, so right now the issue is, as I've stated, we don't have these metrics for schools on a state-by-state basis. And with this mandate from the Department of Education, we can see that obviously literacy is not a one-time standardized test thing, like we take the ACT or the SAT or the SAT. This is something that's going to be covered year-round. And by having these metrics and the support from the Department of Education, we can better help out these students succeed in all other programs.
Okay, and then also you mentioned that the funding that will be coming to provide for these benchmarks are coming from Title I, 10% of Title I, which I'll get into later, but also federal literacy grants. Did you know that the federal government only pays for about 13% of public schools as it sits right now?
Yes, so what we're doing is those federal literacy grants right now have a budget of $130 million. We have the overall Department of Education budget at $82 billion. So we're simply making that budget specifically for Title I, where the funds are there, and we're increasing these grants so that that lack in funding carries over to all schools for this intervention in early grades.
Okay, and then also you said that your plan will fix the low bar of education, and that falls under standardized testing, but who comes up with that standardized testing now?
Right, so currently it's a mixture of state and federal. So states obviously right now for childhood literacy, they don't have that reporting to the Department of Education, so it's hard to get numbers for that and showcase.
All right, so I want to get started off today with a quick, sincere thanks to everyone for making it out today and watching this awesome debate. I've had a great time, prepping it, running it, and, I'm really happy to be up here debating my friend Cole today. So I want to get started with some clash on my opponent's points before bringing up some points of my own. And what you'll see throughout the speech is that there are very different levels in which his case just does not work, and it does not fix the status quo that we're at right now. So first of all, he says that national literacy is down, and that there's a lack of concern among the federal and state legislatures about that national literacy rate. And he mentioned that there's an emphasis on STEM and standardized testing. However, in his plan specifics, he said that right now, what his plan is going to implement is proficiency benchmarks that these people will have to make. So I don't know about anybody else, but when I was growing up in public school, every single year I had to take several different kinds of standardized testing that was proposed by state governments. We called it MAP, we called it STAR, whatever it was. So my question here is, what's the difference between these standardized tests and what my opponent has proposed? If we're having these benchmarks that children are having to meet under his plan, what's to say that that's any different than a literature and reading comprehension section of a MAP test or of a STAR test? And also, as well as this, who is to determine what proficient is to a grade level? We can have an overall standard, but however, this doesn't provide for individualized learning. And what we're seeing is we're still going to see the same problems that come up with standardized testing now. Also, another problem that I have with this plan is the way that it's getting paid for. So he says that he's taking 10% of Title I. And he said that Title I currently provides for schools that are underfunded. So let's think about this logically. If we're taking away part of a program that funds underfunded schools, what's going to happen to the underfunded schools? They're going to be more underfunded. So if we take away 10% of Title I, that just means that we're not fixing the problem of childhood literacy, we're making the problem of underfunded schools worse. So now what I want to get into is some different levels on which the resolution today is not upheld. We're arguing that childhood literacy should not be the #1 concern for schools K through 12. And for the first reason, I have that mental health should come first. Children who are traumatized and mentally unwell do not learn well at all. So if schools are focused more on literacy and meeting these benchmarks, then prioritizing their students' mental health and well-being, we're not going to see an uptake in the level of literacy. We're going to see that more children are struggling, and opposed to this, we need to have a program that prioritizes mental health. The CDC says that 1 in 5 children have mental health issues right now, and that shouldn't just be ignored. In fact, USA Facts reports that 76% of all school staff reports concerns upgraded since COVID. So what does that mean? That just means that schools' #1 concern shouldn't be meeting a benchmark on a standardized test. It should be making sure that their children come first. And we're going to get into this with my second point about equity. Schools should be more focused on funding and teacher quality, because if we can't afford to pay teachers, that means that we can't afford to pay teachers to teach literacy. So a different example of what should be the #1 concern for schools K through 12 could be mental health, it could be equity, and as well as this, I want to talk about the amount of food shortage and the crisis that there is within school districts now and why that should be a #1 issue. So right now, what my opponent's saying that increasing literature will decrease the dropout rate. However, as it sits right now,
The dropout rate is 5.3%. However, the food insecurity rate is 18%. That's more than double the dropout rate. So what does that mean for us? That just means that instead of prioritizing meeting these benchmarks, we need to prioritize putting the children first and putting the teachers first and making sure that we have students who are healthy and well-fed, as well as teachers that are capable of teaching literature to students and aren't being driven away by a low salary. If you find a teacher that is really passionate about what they're talking about, but have to leave their position because they're not getting paid well enough, that's not going to be net beneficial to students. That's going to decrease their quality of learning. And so again, getting into this point about standardized testing, if we focus on teaching children literacy, we prepare them for tests. We prepare them for benchmarks, if that is the number one thing that we're concerned about. So, in fact, Encyclopedia Britannica says that focusing on standardized testing ignores skills like creative thinking and problem solving. And when you look at the really successful people in America today, not even in America, globally, those are people that excel at creative thought and problem solving. So instead of focusing on meeting benchmarks that are proposed that will take away funding from underfunded schools, as my opponent proposes, we need to focus about putting the children and staff first and limiting the amount that we're putting emphasis on standardized testing today. So for these reasons, I urge a firm vote for the negation today, and I will stand for 2 minutes of cross-examination.
All right, great speech. I just want to go ahead and give some questions for today. First of all, why are kids not getting the food they need?
Well, right now, a big part about why children are not getting the food that they need comes from a lack of federal care. It comes from the fact that people in higher positions don't really care about anything other than the money that's going into their pockets. So they're seeing that they don't really care about children in school and how much they're getting fed. They just care about their billfuls.
So you would agree that we need to be able to vote to put people into positions where these kids can get the food that they need and teachers can get paid, correct?
Absolutely. I think that informing children about a creative way of thought and a way to critically think about things that are happening right now should be a very high priority under public school and private school.
So then would increasing those literacy rates that I've talked about not directly help in the long run for putting those people into office that we need to support them?
So in the fact of you need to be able to read the ballot to vote for a candidate, yes, you need to be able to read to be able to do that. However, if you're looking at it from a more ethical perspective, it doesn't take having to read a manual to understand that kicking your puppy dog is bad. It doesn't take an increased or proficient level of literacy to understand morals, and that the candidates that you're voting for may or may not have ulterior motives.
So you're saying that literacy is not going to be more indicative of critical thinking, for example?
I'm saying that focusing on standardized testing will take away from creative thought and instead manufacture people who are willing to provide for the status quo in the way that whoever Department of Education deems necessary.
And if we can all agree that these things are bad, why have we not seen change yet?
Well, that's a really great question. Why haven't we seen change yet? To answer that question, I guess it's because we have a lot of misinformation going around about how things should be done in the federal government.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and start my second speech here today. I'm just going to go ahead and go over some things we have said in cross-ex, some things about my case, and some clash with my opponents. First of all, in that last question, my opponent directly said that there's a lot of misinformation going around about, for example, who you should vote for, how we solve those issues, and things of that nature. Guess what improving and prioritizing childhood literacy will do to solve that? There's going to be more critical thinking across more people throughout the United States in the long run. Encouraging people to go vote, as we've said that childhood literacy increasing does, that 50% more likely. And we're going to see people with better critical thinking skills that are more likely to put people in power that are going to directly address these issues. I'm not going to sit here and argue that the mental health issues are not current in the school education system. I'm not going to sit here and argue that kids aren't getting the food that they need. But in the context of this debate, talking about the prioritization of childhood literacy, the reason that those kids aren't getting that food is not because of the school system, which is what we're talking about today. As my opponent said, that is due to a lot of external factors, which would require a lot more thought in things outside of the school system, which I am not supposed to account for a plan here. Along with this, mental health is a big issue, as my opponent talked about. But how are students meant to understand how to help each other and encourage each other to be more intelligent about the aspects of mental health? Literacy does that, and critical thinking does that. As I've showcased here, we must look at a priority or an a priori issue by increasing these childhood literacy rates. As I've said, which was not refuted obviously, we're going to see more people graduating overall. We're going to see more people voting and helping out in their community. And in school, we will see a higher priority of mental health because more people understand the effects that mental health has, and more people are better able to help people in their community in order to essentially go from the level that we're at now, where most people have low understandings of mental health needs, to a much higher level, which is why it has to be a priority within public schools. Along with this, going about the teacher pay and about standardized testing that my opponent clashed with in my case. For the funding of the budget, the 10% of the Title I, which does go to schools that are already underfunded at a state level, Title I is already used for these early interventions. All I'm doing is simply allocating that budget to where we specifically have that money in order to spend, as we're not necessarily spending it the most efficiently we can in order to help with childhood literacy. And along with this, I've directly demonstrated how we can provide these net benefits to students. There's going to be a better showcase of economic growth. More people will gain critical thinking and have more empathy for others, and overall, it's going to help students in every single subject. Therefore, you must vote for the affirmations plan today. Thank you.
So I want to get into some quick refutation of my opponent's arguments today, and we're going to start that off with the point about misinformation and about how teaching literacy to children will increase critical thinking skills if prioritized. However, what I want to point out is that this point was largely focused around voting-based, and about the level of political misinformation that we see throughout the entire United States. But what I want to point out here is that political misinformation does not take priority over eating. And so, when we're looking at the resolution today, that childhood literacy should be the #1 concern for schools K through 12. Yeah, that's great that, we want to teach children about political misinformation and how to think critically, but how are they supposed to do that if they haven't eaten for 2 days? And if we're not providing funding for these children to have one reliable meal a day, if not 2. So, and then that goes into another refutation that I have about that funding. So, my opponent said that what his plan will do is reallocate parts of Title I to go towards his plan. And, okay, cool, but if there's more to spend under Title I right now, why aren't we spending it? We can't reallocate something if it's completely dried up. And if it's not completely dried up, then what's the point of having a budget anyway? And then, as well as this, we cannot teach children to be mental health aware if we don't have people to teach them. This drives back my point about equity. If we do not have people to teach the children these things that my opponent are saying is so important, then we cannot teach them that they're important. In fact, how it sits right now is, according to the Century Foundation, K through 12 schools are underfunded by about $150 billion annually. So If you want to have a #1 prioritization, it should not be childhood literacy. Thank you.
We will now move into a grand cross-examination where the two debaters will take turns asking and answering each other's questions.
All right, a lot of questions about to be asked. Just for another clarification thing, you would agree that right now the current administration is not taking the steps that we need in order to help better fund public education K through 12, correct?
I'm saying that as it sits right now, we have several people who are trying to prioritize money in their pockets through the numbers that we see through standardized testing as opposed to caring about the individual instead. So, as well as this, I do want to clarify about your plan for funding and say that 10% of Title I budget, could you reiterate the amount that the Title I budget is at right now?
Yes, so Title I, it varies obviously year to year. For the grants that I talked about, right now it's $190 million. And for the intervention in Title I as a whole, we're sitting closer to around $1 billion. So once again, Title I is already used for schools that are underfunded and need that intervention. I am not advocating that we need to spend more of the Title I money or that we need to increase the budget, which it would help, yes. All I'm simply doing is using and reallocating the budget to that 5 to 10%. Because right now, we're not seeing that specific dedication to the benefit and prioritization of childhood literacy, which would overall produce more net benefits for kids K through 12. And along with your mental health point, would increasing literacy rates help others better identify mental health signs and support those with mental health issues?
I don't think that, if you have people that are concerned about mental health, I don't think it's going to be able, I don't think it's going to require being able to check A through D to be able to tell that someone close to you is struggling. I think that if that doesn't come from a personal level, then we have a larger issue than childhood literacy. So you said that the federal grants that we're seeing right now ultimately add up to about $1 billion-ish. However, as I reported in my speech, K through 12 schools are underfunded by about $150 billion annually. How is this amount of money going to aid in that underfunding?
So what we're doing essentially with the money we have, yes, they are underfunded, and again, that's a separate issue that the Department of Education can't solve. That's ultimately up to the federal government to decide, but by prioritizing this literacy, as I pointed out, we have the money, and we know the Department of Education's budget is around $82 billion. So working within those constraints that we have to look at what is the most important for the money to be spending on. And if we have this allocated budget, as I've said, and we bring priority to early childhood intervention, as I've stated, we're going to see more critical thinking skills and encouragement of people to vote to fix these issues. It's not simply going to happen overnight. And unless for some reason the administration right now changes their views wildly, it's going to take people going to the polls to vote on this common sense issue to get it solved. So we have to start somewhere. And I do just want to take a look. You would say that overall, if we're looking at the benefits to students, by increasing their literacy rates, it's going to help them out in all of their subjects and in their life afterwards, correct?
I'm saying that teaching children to read is an important thing, absolutely. And being able to teach them to comprehend what they're reading is also important. However, again, as I pointed out in my speech, if we're looking at the people who America considers successful, we see that these are the people that prioritize creative thinking and problem solving. So we have a bunch of different levels of what we should be prioritizing over literacy. And trying to get the individual to think creatively should be prioritized at a higher level than simply teaching them how to read and checking a box. so that schools can get the funding that they require. So
that it's because of those low literacy rates and because of that lack of funding, kids just aren't getting the support they need. So by using the actor of the Department of Education, we can look at the priority of literacy in schools. If we have to look at one singular thing to prioritize, and right now we see that there's a big focus on STEM, by looking at those literacy rates and seeing that it improves everything else, slowly and eventually, we are going to see improvements in education overall, regardless of the funding, right? So we can look at states that have limited funding like Oklahoma and things of that nature. And while right now we can't necessarily change the amount of money that they're getting from the state legislature and the government, we can improve the lives of students in schools regardless of budget by the priority of childhood literacy. And for my last question today, overall, the increase in literacy at a young age, by doing this, are we essentially advocating for a better school in general, as in, will it improve basically everything else within school if we prioritize literacy rates?
not necessarily. As it stands right now, we have schools that are mainly focused on reaching these standardized tests that we've both laid out in our cases. And how it sits right now, at least in the school that I was a part of, is that we have these benchmarks about standardized testing, and we had teachers that tried to teach us to be able to read and comprehend at the highest level that we could. And I'm not saying that the teachers that I had weren't adequate. However, I guarantee that their paychecks probably weren't as high as they would like them to be for the amount that they were having to put up with, at least from me and my friends. We like to mess around a little bit. But I can guarantee that they weren't getting paid enough to deal with that. And so the question of, will increasing literacy increase the quality of everything else in the school? Not necessarily. I think that teaching children to read is important. And that's really what we're talking about here today, is that I'm not saying that teaching children how to read and understand what they're reading isn't important. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be doing that. I'm just saying that there are things that come above that and should come first. And if you agree with that, then a vote for the negation would be much more suited for today's debate.
Thank you.
And now, judges, you each get an opportunity to ask the debaters their questions. Would any of you like to have a question you want to go first with? Oh my gosh, we got a mic, guys.
So you had mentioned that by teaching or prioritizing literacy in the K-12 schools, that would necessarily elevate the student's ability to think critically and problem solve. Can you elaborate on how exactly literacy is going to teach creativity and problem solving skills?
Right, so literacy is a lot of things all encompassing. So we're looking at the ability for people to understand what they're reading. We're looking at the ability for people to look at sources, contextualize, and overall process information better. So that's the core of what literacy is. And if we look at literacy, we can come from a standpoint, and we've seen this backed up by many sources, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, where by having that extra understanding that kids lack today, we see that their test scores go up in other areas. They're able to better identify and comprehend problems such as mental health harms and understand how to better combat them. And overall, along with the advantages I've stated, we're going to see success in all subjects. We're going to see more economic growth because people are able to understand and efficiently process information, be more productive, and it's going to improve students' ability to perform at school overall. So that's why we must prioritize childhood literacy in K through 12.
We don't bite, we promise.
Yes, they do, they're lying.
All right, so throughout the debate, you all have done an excellent job of making your points. The one thing I wanted to kind of come back to was looking at the differences between the states, because as you mentioned, we had MAP testing, STAR testing. Before that, it was CURIS, K-PREP, etc. So how do we try to make sure that we are equalizing the field for all the states to receive, that we are teaching literacy for all of the states, given all the different interpretations with the emphasis on standardized testing?
Is this a me? You got it?
I can start.
Yeah, you.
So, great question, right? Obviously, we've demonstrated that states have different levels of funding, whether you cut it, right? And certain states are just worse, generally speaking, with their education priorities. And kind of with what I've talked about now, right now, we're not able to directly change the amount of money states are getting from the federal government or the amount of money states provide, right? But what we can do is by providing this outreach from the Department of Education, something again federally, so we can apply to all states, we can basically show the states, hey, we have this support here. We understand that you may not have the funding for this literacy rates and for other subjects as well. But if we provide a framework and new reporting data, as I've showed in my plan, then we can essentially make it to where, and say to the states, hey, you're doing a good job in this, or you're doing a bad job, we're here to help. And ultimately, with the plan, that's all we can address right now. So it's important we do that. And did you want to?
Yeah, I have something to add about that, is that I 100% agree that the varying levels from state to state about the funding that they're providing is cause for concern, in the sense that one state is not going to be receiving the same amount of money as another state. But what we see under the plan that's being proposed right now is that this isn't going to solve the problem of underfunding. We're still going to be several billions of dollars short of what we need to provide for people to adequately teach anything. And so rewarding states based on how well can their students perform in a standardized test and what their test scores show, as opposed to what do you think, Susie would be good at in the workforce, and how do we individually tailor that to her? We don't see a process in which it's the federal government saying, we're here for you, let us help, we can do that. What we're seeing is that we'll have a process in which we won't see high enough test scores, and then the people who provide the funding will say, they're not doing too great, we can't show that we're giving this amount of money to them, we have to give it to another state whose test scores are better. And so it's not an outreach program, it's a reward and punishment system that we're going to be seeing under the plan today. And it will worsen the amount of underfunding that schools that are being provided through Title I right now are seeing, because we're taking away part of that funding and putting it towards a process that only prioritizes literacy. So we won't solve the problem. It's just going to change the way that we prioritize literacy over something like STEM.
So no other questions? All right. Now it's time for the audience to have their opportunities to ask questions. If you have a question, just raise your hand and the mic will be brought to you. Any questions, guys?
Oh no, the debate people are asking us debate questions.
I promise.
I'm so scared.
I promise these aren't from us. These are from people online.
Oh,
Even
okay.
better.
We have a live chat.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. So your first question from online comes with a statement before it. It says, in Kentucky, students are taught the parts of speech beginning in 4th grade and continue to be taught this same material every year all the way through their senior year. And yet many still struggle to master the topic as a senior. So the question is, What indication do we have that we will have more success with teaching reading comprehension as an emphasis?
Right. So I can talk about that. So that was going to be mainly, we're talking about the first harm, is that the rates are already dangerously low. And if we see that carryover from kindergarten to 12th, if we don't establish those roots and those foundations early on, then biologically it's going to become harder for students that don't have those roots and that background in high school to kind of establish those thoughts and be able to reach their literacy rates as a whole. So once again, we're talking about, like, the 4th graders, for instance. We see those literacy rates go lower as we go to the higher grades. So if we have this intervention and we have the ability to help out kids when they're in the early stages of learning, we can establish good habits, good foundations, and overall improve their school as they progress through the grades.
Okay, your next question is that children need their basic needs met before they can learn, and since the pandemic, anxiety and depression rates have soared. How can children worry about reading when their parents are unable to meet their needs?
So this ties into my first and second point about how, you know, we can't prioritize reading if we can't prioritize students' health. Whether that looks like mental health or physical health, children aren't going to be able to learn at the top capacity if they aren't being catered to and being taken care of by people who are supposed to take care of them. So again, whether that looks like you know, increasing a way of increasing funding to teach people how to specialize in aiding mental health throughout all of K through 12 and even beyond, that's really up to the states as it sits right now. But what I can say is that shoving the word syntax down someone's throat throughout all of high school isn't necessarily increasing their mental health. I know it didn't for me, but it's not going to help them in terms of depression and anxiety. All it's going to do is maybe produce some kind of output of, I guessed, it was a 25% chance A through D, and I guessed and I got it right, yay me. 33 on the ACT.
Okay, I'm going to ask the audience one more time. Does anybody have any questions?
Raise your hand high if you have them.
It's really awesome how everybody understands all of the technical aspects of school funding.
All right.
Cole, we're really good at our job.
Well, that's debatable.
Get it? Debatable?
One final question for you all. What role should a local community's culture play on what subjects the school focuses on? Should we expect a student in Appalachia to have the same needs in a classroom of students from a Louisville suburb?
So that's a really good question. And we, again, look at the needs of different on a state-by-state basis. So a lot of that is going to come down to funding for certain school districts, the accessibility for education, and then the amount of teachers that each school district has. And like I said, I can't make the budget for every school district magically rise. That's just something that's not going to happen. And we can see that obviously districts that have less students are going to receive less funding. So like kids in Appalachia, for instance, it might be harder to have that access to education, which is going to contribute to them having different needs from like Mail or like my school, Martha Lane Collins, right? They're just not going to be the same needs. But what we can say is if we provide this benchmark for literacy, which at the end of the day is something everyone needs, by addressing this issue, if we have needs at different schools for what their curriculum is and whether they're better or worse at science or math, we can see that we're going to receive net benefits from this literacy rates going up, and they're going to be able to better cater for individuals at each school district. So if we see that Timmy in southern South Dakota, their literacy program is beneficial overall, he might be better at math than he was previously, which is what their school district could focus on. But if we look at, again, that kid from Appalachia, if they need to be more focused on the environment or economics, by that literacy, regardless, we're going to see improvements overall.
Any more questions? Go on, all you gotta do is raise your hand. Very simple. No questions? All right. We'll move into the final speeches of both of our competitors today. All right, so I've got 3 minutes to talk to you here about why ultimately you should vote for the negation today. And what I'm going to be talking about is going to be other levels that should be prioritized higher, other things that should be put on a higher level than childhood literacy. We're going to be talking about funding, and we're going to be talking about standardized testing and the harms that come with that. So first, the things that should be prioritized over childhood literacy. And what I'm proposing is that having a system in place that prioritizes literacy isn't necessarily going to be what does Jimmy need to learn how to read and what does Susie need to be able to learn to the best of her ability. What this policy is going to look like is going to be the Department of Education setting a benchmark that each state will have to meet in order to get funding to provide for basic needs. And so this isn't going to lead us to a system where each individual child is tailored to. And it isn't going to lead us to a system where teachers are paid fairly in order to get to the point where they are happy where they are and content in how much they're getting paid to teach children these things. So we have to prioritize mental health and equity over literacy for these two reasons. If you are hungry, if you are mentally unwell, if you're depressed, if you're anxious, you will not be able to learn at the same level as someone who is not. And if you have no resources available to help you, then you're not going to see that get better. Or it's likely that we're not going to see that get better. There are exceptions, of course. But we're not going to see that people are prioritized. We're going to see that numbers are prioritized. Do you want your children to be statistics, or do you want them to be people? And that is the ultimate question that we're asking today. And that leads us into standardized testing. We both agree that standardized testing is bad. However, what my opponent's plan lays out is standardized testing with a mask of progress benchmarks set by the federal government that states will have to perform to. So we have issues with standardized testing in the sense that it doesn't put out critically thinking, problem-solving, creatively minded people. They're putting out people who know how to mark A, B, C, or D. So for these reasons, a strong vote for the negation today is much more beneficial to children throughout America and the world. Thank you.
One last blanket of thanks to my judges, my audience, and my SDU members as well. As my first Dean's Debate, I can't be more grateful to be up here talking to you. But today we're going to go ahead and talk about my voters today, or why you should stand in firm affirmation of the resolution that childhood literacy should be the #1 concern for schools K through 12. My first voter is going to be how we're able to judge this round. Today, we are looking at the net benefits to kids in these K through 12 schools. So in order for you to vote today, judges, we must look at whose side is providing those benefits to kids. Throughout my plan, I've showcased how we're taking funds that aren't being used properly and pouring them into a system that is underfunded. By increasing and prioritizing childhood literacy, we're not only able to increase the critical thinking skills and overall reading comprehension levels, but we're also able to provide students with a roots and framework in order to succeed in every aspect of the classroom. My second voter today is going to be the status quo. As my opponent pointed out, yes, teachers are underfunded. Schools aren't getting the care they receive. But in the aspect of debate today, I, as the affirmation, must focus on how I can make a recognizable change through existing means. I can't add more money to the budget for schools. I can't tell the federal government to increase what little budget that they've already cut. But what I can tell you today is I can come up here with a plan that will work to the benefit of these kids. We can prioritize childhood literacy in K-12 schools. We can improve the lives of everybody, not only for when kids are in school, but afterwards, when we see a net benefit to the economy along with voter turnout. And that today is why you must vote for the affirmation. And my last and final voter today is common sense. It's pretty common sense to say that we need a little bit more sense. And simply by having the school system as it is today, that level is going to stay the same. As we move to more standardized testing, as my opponent pointed out, we're not seeing that encouragement of critical thinking skills across the United States. For what we can do now, we can raise the levels across the nation of childhood literacy. We can see that through my plan, we're able to provide benefits to those kids. And by increasing the common sense throughout the nation, we can put people in office who serve to act on these priorities that aren't happening today. Judges, by educating the future of America, we can see a change that lasts much longer than simply increasing the budget could ever do. For all of these reasons, I urge everyone in this room to side with the affirmation. Thank you.
And now, it's the time you've all been waiting for. It's time to vote. Give me 1 moment. So you won't be able to see my face for a few seconds, unfortunately. Or maybe not. It's finally down, guys. You can scan it now. Let's take this chance and just scan it real quick and cast your votes. And while you do that, Dr. Cook will give our final speech of the day.
Let's give another hand for our MC, Haley. As you think about all the work that these students have done tonight, I want you to remember and to understand that this is our freshman class of debaters, and they're doing an exceptional job. So they've been doing this for a grand total of like 13 weeks. Right? This is exactly why I recruited all 3 of these for a job. So give them one more round of applause. While I go through my thank yous, I got a few people I got to thank tonight. What the judges will do is they will circle either the AF if they side with Cole, or the NEG if they side with Isabella, and then our team president will collect those and bring those up to me, and I will announce those, and then we will have our MC announce the crowd favorite that y'all voted for. And if you're online, please vote as well. All right, so there are levels of support for our team, and first and foremost, I need to thank my wife, Dr. Ryan Goke, for everything that she does to support us. She doesn't always get the recognition she deserves, but she's at every event that we go to. She supports us, and she holds down the fort while we're traveling. So let's give her a big round of applause. I see a lot of familiar and friendly faces. Dr. Keller, thank you for being a champion of the students and the faculty of the Bonafide College of Business, and for the SDU. We appreciate your support, and I cannot think of a better person for this job, so thank you. I want to, yes. Two other members of his office that I'd like to mention by name. Teresa Chandler has helped me navigate what I consider to be a nightmare of red tape since I got here, because organization and red tape is not my strong suit. Marianne Gardner for helping me coordinate everything on campus. We are hosting a high school speech tournament this weekend, and I have people doing things at all hours of the day and helping us with that. My assistant director, who is not here tonight, but I believe she's watching, Anna Moyers, and also our esteemed alumnus, Josh Sanders, who is here this evening. Both of them are the reason that these students are as good as they are. Because having this many individuals who do not just debate, not just the one speech we saw, on average, these students are doing 3 to 4 speeches that are around 10 minutes in length. That is a lot of time that they spend listening and giving feedback so that they can go and win. So let's give them a round of applause. Have you seen our new advertisements, our new posters? That is photographed courtesy of Professor Ed Rohde in the Department of Journalism and Mass Communications, and his commercial photography 1. Students were the one who shot those. They did a fantastic job, and we were able to then put those into promotional posters. So a huge thank you goes out to him and his students. And then also thank you for the help from Mr. Jeremy McKeel and the folks over at Digital Media Services for helping us broadcast this so that we can have those online watching as well as your moderators and the ones watching everything in the comment sections that I have as other members of my team, Sam Harless and Sam Miller. There's a lot of work that goes in behind the scenes. They spend 10 to 15 hours a week practicing and rehearsing so that they can do as well as they do. And that doesn't include extra things like this that we do to try and showcase and engage the community or the tournaments. So a huge thank you to every member of my team for everything that they've been doing. And last, and certainly most importantly, because we're going to be getting a vote here in just a second, I think, thank you to our esteemed judges. All right, I'm going to turn things over to your MC, who's going to announce, do we have a decision? Okay, we're going to let you do the announcement, and then if you are here for extra credit, we will set up a piece of paper that you can sign in on, and we'll get that to your professors, and then we'd like to do a picture with the team and the guests that we have here. So, all right.
He's a little difficult, guys. It's okay. So we can see our competitors and their faces. So tonight's decision was a 2-1 decision. But tonight's decision goes, the winner of tonight's debate goes to the affirmative, Colton Boyd. There's also a poll of who your favorite debater was tonight. And with a decision of, so far, 19 to 16, the winner of the poll of your favorite debater is Isabella Voss.
Thank you all for coming. We'll set out that paper and y'all can come down.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good night, everybody.
Yeah.
So, come up front if you want extra credit.
Oh.